Hi everyone, I'm so happy to be here. My name is Vanessa Nakate and I'm a climate activist from Uganda. I'm so excited to be speaking to you today, especially about my activism and why I started doing activism. Well, becoming an activist, of course, it was a process for me. I started activism in 2018. That is when I felt like I wanted to do something that could cause change in the lives of the people in my community and in my country. And honestly, I thought that I would do this for just a few months, but along the way, I just felt like I needed to keep doing this because I hadn't seen the change that I was fighting for. So when I realized that climate change was one of the biggest challenges that the people in my country were facing, I decided to start activism by doing the climate strikes. And I'm sure many of you know about the climate strikes that happen every Friday. They were started by Greta as a way of demanding for action from our government leaders. When I became an activist, I simply wanted to see that different kinds of people have access to a better future, to a healthier planet, to a healthier environment. We are clearly seeing what is happening to our planet right now. We are seeing the mess that is going on and all the challenges that people are facing right now. In my country, many people heavily depend on agriculture as a form of survival. But you find that with the increasing global temperatures, many people's farms and crops stand at risk of being destroyed by the increasing dry spells. Because as the temperatures increase, as the temperatures rise, there's going to be uneven distribution of rainfall, bringing about shorter rainy seasons. And we've clearly seen this in Uganda. Not just the shorter rainy seasons, but longer dry spells. The farmers can no longer predict when they're going to receive rainfall. They grow crops, but with no hope of harvesting them because they end up losing all their produce to floods, to droughts, and they are left with nothing. Climate change greatly threatens the availability of food for the people in my country and the availability of water for the people in my country. I usually say that you find that there are people whose toilet water is cleaner than the water that the people in some countries use for their domestic purposes. The climate crisis is so visible in Uganda as a country as we see our largest lake, Lake Victoria, with its increasing water levels, submerging different homes and leaving people with no place to stay. Imagine being in a pandemic that we are facing right now while still being affected by the impacts of climate change. Many people's homes have been submerged by the increasing water levels of the lake. In the western part of the country, the rivers are bursting, their banks are bursting, and people are being left homeless because their property is destroyed, their homes are destroyed, their farms are destroyed. What is the hope for these people at a time like this? The hope comes in the voices of the activists who are fighting for a better future for them. You know, when you look at climate change, it isn't just about the primary effects that everyone sees, the floods, the droughts, the heat waves, the storms, the hurricanes, among others. There is always more after those primary disasters that many people forget to dig deep into to understand the heaviness of this crisis. Do you ever sit down and think about what happens to a family after they have lost everything to a flood or to a landslide? Most families are forced to migrate with the hope of finding better places for living and survival. But unfortunately, they are pushed into impoverished communities. They're pushed into slums whereby they have to struggle to survive. Some of them are subjected to risks of human trafficking as a result of them trying to get something to eat, something for their children. And what do we know about human trafficking? It comes with forced labor, sexual slavery, gender-based violence. These are things that we never think about. Do you ever think about the conflicts that arise because of climate disasters? Well, if you don't see the connection between the conflicts and climate change, I will explain it to you in the simplest way possible by giving you the example of one of the lakes in Africa, and that is Lake Chad. This lake has shrunk to 10th its size in just 50 years. But the number of people who need the fresh waters of this lake is not reducing. The population continues to grow. As a result, people are going to start struggling for the resources because they want ownership, they want leadership over the waters of the lake. Many communities are going to get involved in local fights, in local conflicts, just to have access or authority over the water sources. I mean, what do you expect if the resources are limited? Everyone will try to survive. Clearly showing you that any efforts of building peace in some communities, they are pointless if we do not address climate change. Climate change affects almost everything that concerns us. You cannot eradicate poverty without addressing climate change. Many people are trying so much to get out of poverty through the crops that they grow, through the crops that they sell. But when they lose everything to the climate disasters, they are pushed back to zero and they have to start from scratch again. So you see how much climate change continuously pushes people into extreme poverty. So we won't be able to eradicate poverty if we do not stop climate change. Talk about zero hunger. How can we be able to achieve zero hunger with our farms getting destroyed, with our crops being swept away, with our crops being dried up by droughts or the floods? We cannot be able to achieve this. We cannot be able to see zero hunger in these communities if we do not address climate change. We cannot be able to protect life underwater, life on land. I mean, climate change connects with everything. When I bring about the gender issue when it comes to climate change, we see that the women are affected the most. So how can we be able to ensure gender equality if we do not address climate change? In most of the communities in Africa, it is the women that put food on the table. It is the women that have to collect water for their families. But in the case of a long dry spell, many of them have to walk long distances to get access to water for their families. They have to do double the work they've been doing to provide food for their children. In my country, women are not allowed to climb trees. But in the case of an occurrence of a flood, the first way of survival is by climbing a tree. So now you see that if a climate disaster occurs, if 5 men die in that disaster, 15 women will die in the same disaster. Some women are found pregnant. Some of them are single mothers. Climate change affects every aspect of our life. And this is why it is important for all of us to get involved in demanding for action, in demanding for change. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter who you are. Your platform doesn't matter. What really matters are the small actions that you will take to ensure that everyone has access to a better future, to ensure that the resources of the coming generations are not compromised. It is the small acts that will bring about change in this world. And you can do something about this. In your own capacity, you can bring about change in your community, in your country. Climate change affects us all. It doesn't matter whether you feel its impacts right now. You not feeling the impacts or seeing them directly affecting your life does not erase the existence of the climate crisis. We need to continuously hold our leaders accountable for the mess that we are in right now. We need to keep speaking up. We shouldn't keep silent when our leaders are continuously investing in the fossil fuel industry and continuously opening up new coal power plants, new oil refineries. We cannot keep silent because we have to keep the degrees below 2 degrees Celsius. 1.5 is already bad. We are already seeing how bad it is, how people are suffering, how people are dying, how livelihoods are being destroyed. We cannot afford to exceed that. We cannot afford not to take action. We cannot afford not to go sustainable. Some of the actions that I do as an activist, I go out on the streets to do the climate strikes every Friday. But now that we are in this current pandemic, we have to treat every crisis like the crisis that it is. So if this pandemic is a crisis, then we have to stay at home to stop the spread of the virus. But that doesn't stop the activism. We continue to speak up online, on social media, on our different platforms, and you can do that as well. The other things that I do are projects whereby I tell stories of other climate activists because I know the struggle of being heard. I know the struggle of being listened to, of your story being told. So I try as much as possible to make sure that every other activist is given a platform. I also started a project that involves the installation of solar panels, solar energy, and institutional stoves in school. And I'm so happy about this project simply because it is bringing about change in these rural communities. It is a learning experience for the students, for the parents, for the teachers. And I mean, we need to transition to renewable energy as soon as possible. But if people cannot access renewable energy, then we have to try and make it accessible for them. And this project is fully monitored and financed by the internet. I also do school reach out with fellow activists in Uganda, like Evelyn, like Davis, Edwin, Kevin from Kenya, Joshua, among others. There's so many. We do this activism. We do these activities. We go to these schools and talk to students because we believe that if we educate the younger generation, they will be able to do the right thing to save our planet, to ensure conservation of our environment. And you who is watching me, you can do something. In your capacity, you can do something. It doesn't matter what you have. It doesn't matter the resources that you have. Your voice matters. Your voice can change a life. I usually say that every activist has a story to tell. So meaning you have a story to tell the moment you decide to start climate activism. And every story has a solution to give. So you have solutions for the world. You have solutions for our planet. So do not keep silent. And every solution has a life to change. What I'm trying to tell you is that the moment you take the step of action, of activism, you are saving a life somewhere. Thank you so much for listening to me.